In this video, you will follow the incredible journey of Gregory Faulkner, a millionaire who had it all: power, luxury, and an enviable life. However, after a series of disastrous decisions, Gregory loses everything: money, friends, and even his dignity. Overnight, he finds himself living on the streets, completely ruined. But fate has something in store for him. A figure from his past returns to change his life in an unexpected way. Hannah McAllister, a former employee whom Gregory cruelly humiliated and fired, resurfaces, but now as a powerful and successful woman. What will she do with Gregory, who is now at the mercy of her help? Hannah's proposal, however, is not simple. Gregory will have to accept conditions that test his pride, his honor, and his willingness to start over. He will face moral dilemmas that not only challenge his survival, but also his search for redemption. And more. Has Hannah really forgiven him? Or is there something else behind this new opportunity? Every decision Gregory makes could lead him to a new downfall, or to the salvation he desperately seeks. Throughout this story, unexpected encounters with characters from his past force him to confront his deepest mistakes, creating a growing sense of suspense. But the ending? You won't see it coming. How far is Gregory willing to go to find peace with himself? And does life still offer him a chance at redemption? Watch until the end to discover the surprising conclusion to this story about pride, regret, and second chances. Gregory Faulkner was at the height of his power. His immense fortune and his position at the top of Faulkner Industries were proof that he had conquered the world in his own way. However, Gregory was not just a ruthless businessman. He was cruel, firmly believing that any sign of weakness should be eliminated. His ever-watchful eyes were focused on Richard Hastings, an old colleague who had become his rival in the financial market. Richard, unlike Gregory, believed in conducting business with ethics and compassion. To Gregory, this was a sign of weakness, something he could not tolerate. And on that day, in his luxurious office overlooking New York City, Gregory decided it was time to destroy Richard. He spent weeks manipulating contracts, sabotaging deals, and planting false information that would destroy Richard's credibility on Wall Street. Every move was calculated, every step meticulously planned. Finally, the blow was struck. Richard lost everything. Gregory, from his window, watched as Richard, desolate, left his office for the last time. In that moment, Richard not only lost his career but also his family, who abandoned him when bankruptcy struck. Gregory watched it all with a cold smile, satisfied to have eliminated another opponent. For him, Richard's suffering was proof that only the strong survived in the world of business. Months later, Faulkner Industries was hosting its grand annual gala, a luxurious event where the biggest names in the financial market gathered to celebrate the company's success and its leader, Gregory Faulkner. Impeccably dressed, Gregory circulated among the guests, receiving compliments and reverence. However, he was not there just to celebrate. He had something else in mind, something that would show everyone that no one dared to challenge him. Among the executives was Hannah McAllister, a dedicated and competent employee who had made a minor mistake on a recent project. It was an easily fixable error, but Gregory saw it as an opportunity to send a clear message. During the height of the party, when everyone was gathered for the toast, Gregory took the microphone. His eyes swept across the room until they landed on Hannah, who was among the executives at the front of the room.
"Ladies and gentlemen,"
he began, his firm voice reverberating through the hall.
"Today I want to take this moment to recognize someone who has not lived up to the standards of excellence we demand at Faulkner Industries."
Silence fell over the crowd, and everyone's gaze turned to Hannah, who felt a chill run down her spine.
"Hannah McAllister, you are fired."
The words cut through the air like a blade. Hannah stood frozen, unable to process what she had just heard. The hall fell silent, broken only by the sound of scattered applause from a few executives who, fearing Gregory, joined in the spectacle of public humiliation. With tears in her eyes, Hannah ran out as Gregory remained in the center of the hall, a satisfied smile illuminating his face. For him, this was the ultimate demonstration of power, the ability to destroy a person with a single word. But fate, always unpredictable, began to conspire against Gregory Faulkner. Within months, what seemed to be an unshakable empire started to crumble. Small failures began to appear in his business, seemingly insignificant at first, but growing in intensity. Gregory, arrogant as ever, ignored the initial signs, believing that his fortune and influence would protect him. However, the problems did not stop. Scandals emerged, deals collapsed, and investigations began to knock at his door. Soon, Gregory realized he was alone. Those he trusted began to disappear. His supposed friends and allies abandoned him when the first rumors of a federal investigation surfaced. He desperately tried to save his empire, but it was too late. Every move he made to try to repair the damage only worsened the situation. The final blow came on a gray autumn afternoon when Gregory was forced to watch his childhood home being auctioned off to pay debts. He remained stoic as the bidders vied for the property. But when the hammer fell, signaling the sale, something inside him broke. The house where he grew up, the only place that held emotional value for him, now belonged to someone else. In that moment, Gregory finally understood what it meant to lose everything. It was not just the material loss, but the loss of his own identity, of who he believed he was. Gregory Faulkner, who once ruled with an iron fist, was now adrift, powerless, penniless, and alone. He had become what he despised most: weak, vulnerable, human. And so his journey of redemption and self-discovery was about to begin, forged in the fire of his own destruction. The morning seemed ordinary for Gregory Faulkner, but he was about to experience the worst day of his life. The sun shone over Manhattan, reflecting off the windows of the luxurious apartment where he resided, but inside his heart, everything felt dark. When the process servers arrived, they knocked forcefully on the door. Gregory, still groggy from sleep, opened it only to be confronted by the harsh reality of his ruin. They carried court orders and papers that mandated the immediate eviction from his property.
Mr. Faulkner, the apartment is being seized to cover your debts. You have 1 hour to remove your essential belongings,
said one of the men in a firm voice, leaving no room for negotiation. Gregory tried to argue, using the authoritative tone that had worked so well in his negotiations. But this time, his words came out weak, powerless. The officer, devoid of any emotion, simply reiterated the deadline. The news of Gregory's eviction spread quickly among his former friends, those who once applauded him at glamorous parties and revered him as the King of Wall Street. When Gregory finally left the building, with a small suitcase in hand, he was met with looks that mixed disdain and sadistic pleasure. Some of those ex-friends were there, watching from inside their luxury cars. They laughed and took photos with their cell phones, capturing the moment when the once invincible Gregory Faulkner fell from grace. He tried to approach one of them, James, a man with whom he had done business in the past and who owed much of his own fortune to Gregory.
James, can you help me? Just until I get back on my feet. It can't end like this.
Gregory pleaded, his voice betraying the desperation he felt. James looked at him for a moment, his eyes filled with cold indifference before responding,
Gregory, business is business. You understand that, don't you? Now you're just another failure in line.
And with that, he rolled up the window of his car and drove away, leaving Gregory standing there on the sidewalk, with the sound of laughter still echoing in his ears. The days that followed were a blur of despair and humiliation. Gregory, without money and nowhere to stay, was forced to wander the streets of New York City, the city he once controlled like his personal kingdom. He, who was used to dining at the finest restaurants, now searched for something edible in the trash bins on street corners. On the first night, he tried to sleep on a park bench. The temperature was dropping, and Gregory, without a suitable coat, curled up to keep warm. In the early morning, he was awakened by a kick to the stomach. 3 men, homeless, surrounded him.
"What do you have there, rich boy?"
One of them asked, laughing maliciously. Gregory tried to argue, but they didn't want to listen. One of them yanked the small suitcase he carried, while another ripped the shoes off his feet. They laughed, enjoying the situation, before leaving him on the ground, barefoot and humiliated. With no other choice, Gregory began to move through the darker parts of the city, trying to avoid further violent encounters. The biting cold hit him like blades, and the hole in his stomach wouldn't stop growing. In a desperate attempt to find food, he approached a food cart in an alley. The smell of the food was almost unbearable in its deliciousness. He waited until the owner was distracted and then, with a trembling hand, tried to grab a bread roll. But before he could take a bite, he felt a hard blow to his head. The teenagers who had watched him knew he was an ex-rich. They surrounded him, mocking his miserable attempt to steal food, and pushed him repeatedly, knocking him into the dirt of the alley. It was a cold, rainy night when Gregory, broken and hopeless, sought refuge under the awning of a closed store. He huddled in a corner, feeling the raindrops trickle through the cracks in the roof, soaking his already filthy clothes. As the world around him continued at its frenetic pace, Gregory finally succumbed to the overwhelming weight of what his life had become. He began to think about Hannah McAllister, the executive he had publicly fired months earlier. The image of her running away in tears from the gala returned to his mind with painful clarity. For the first time, he allowed the feelings he had buried deep within to surface. Memories of all the people he had crushed in his quest for power started to haunt him. Every face, every name, every tear shed because of his cruelty now tormented him. Gregory had always believed that the world was a game where he was the most skilled player. But that night, wrapped in cold and misery, he realized that he had lost more than his fortune. He had lost his very humanity. Tears began to flow down his face, mingling with the rain, and for the first time in years, he cried. He cried for Hannah, for Richard, for everyone he had hurt, and for himself. The weight of the choices he had made and the lives he had ruined finally hit him, breaking him completely. Gregory Faulkner, who once saw himself as invincible, was now just a lost man, destroyed by his own actions. It had been 2 years since Gregory Faulkner was thrown onto the streets. His appearance was that of a completely ruined man. Bones visible through pale skin, clothes dirty and torn, and a vacant stare that conveyed the deep hopelessness consuming him. He barely resembled the man who once commanded a financial empire. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, and each step was a struggle to continue. On a cold night, he wandered the streets of Manhattan, guided by a basic instinct for survival. In the distance, he saw the warm, inviting lights of a luxury restaurant. The name Delmonico's shone in gold above the door, a place he knew well. Once, Gregory had been a regular at that restaurant, where champagne was served in crystal glasses and deals were sealed with a simple handshake. He approached the entrance, hesitating for a moment at the sight of impeccably dressed staff and wealthy patrons laughing carefreely. The need for food, however, outweighed the shame, and he entered, trying to stay on the fringes, invisible. But it was impossible not to be noticed. His deplorable state starkly contrasted with the opulent surroundings, and looks of disdain were cast in his direction. He spotted an untouched plate of food on a table near the bar and slowly approached, his eyes fixed on the meal as if it were the last hope of a condemned man. But before he could get close, he heard a voice that froze his blood.
Gregory Faulkner?
A feminine voice filled with disbelief echoed through the restaurant. He turned slowly, his heart pounding, and there stood Hannah McAllister, dining with a group of investors. She was stunning in an elegant dress, her presence radiating power and confidence. But what struck him most was the look in her eyes, a mix of shock and something else he couldn't decipher. Hannah stood up, her gaze locked on him, while Gregory, in a panic, tried to find a way out, any route of escape. But his feet seemed glued to the ground. He was unrecognizable, but she recognized him, and now he had nowhere to run. The silence in the restaurant was palpable. All eyes were fixed on the scene unfolding before them. Gregory tried to hide his face, but Hannah was just a few steps away, determined not to let him escape this time. She stopped in front of him, her green eyes fixed on his, and the anger she had contained for so long began to surface.
I could hardly believe it when I saw you here.
She began, her voice low but charged with emotion.
Do you remember me, Gregory? Or have you already forgotten all the people you crushed to get where you are?
Gregory tried to respond, but the words stuck in his throat. He saw the waiter approach, attempting to intervene, but Hannah raised her hand, signaling for him to stay away.
Do you remember that night, Gregory, when you fired me in front of everyone, as if I were nothing?
Hannah continued, her voice now firm and clear.
You destroyed my career, humiliated me in front of all our colleagues. That night, I went home and cried like I had never cried before. Did you even care? Of course not. To you, I was just another disposable piece in your power game.
Gregory's eyes filled with tears as he tried to absorb the intensity of Hannah's words. He knew she was right, but he had never felt the weight of his actions until that moment.
Hannah, I'm so sorry.
He stammered, but the words felt empty, insignificant in the face of the pain he had caused.
Sorry?
Hannah echoed, her voice trembling with the intensity of her emotions.
Do you know what it's like to lose everything? No, you didn't know. Until now.
She took a step closer, looking directly into his eyes.
Look at you, Gregory. The great irony of it all is that now you are exactly where you put so many people. At rock bottom, with nothing, no one.
The patrons around them were silent, some shocked, others feigning curiosity. Gregory, feeling the weight of every gaze, was paralyzed, unable to move or speak. The humiliation he felt was overwhelming, but there was something more, a painful understanding that he deserved every word Hannah was saying. Hannah took a deep breath, trying to control the storm of emotions consuming her. She observed him, seeing the pathetic and ruined figure of a man who had once been her tormentor. As much as she wanted to hate him, there was something inside her, a spark of compassion that began to grow. Gregory Faulkner was destroyed, and she realized that true strength did not lie in trampling on someone already down, but in offering a chance for redemption.
Do you want my help, Gregory?
She finally asked, her voice now calmer.
Are you willing to do anything to get out of this hole you've dug for yourself?
Gregory, still with his head down, simply nodded in silence, feeling what was left of his pride being crushed.
Then here's what's going to happen.
Hannah continued firmly.
I will help you. I'll give you a job, a roof over your head, and a chance to rebuild yourself. But there's a condition.
She paused, allowing her words to sink in.
You will work for me. You will start from the bottom, very bottom. It will be at my company, McAllister Capital Group. And do you know what your position will be, Gregory? You will be the janitor. You will clean the offices, the bathrooms, the meeting rooms, where once you made decisions that impacted the fate of thousands.
Gregory looked up, surprised by the proposal. The idea of working as a janitor at the company Hannah had built, the same woman he had cruelly fired, was an even greater humiliation than he could imagine. But he knew he had no choice. If he refused, he would be lost forever. And perhaps in some way, working for Hannah was the only way he could find a path back to dignity.
I accept.
He replied, his voice weak, almost imperceptible. Hannah watched him for a moment, her eyes hard and unyielding.
Tomorrow at 6 a.m, be at the McAllister Capital headquarters. And don't be late, Faulkner. Your second chance starts now.
With those words, Hannah returned to her table, the investors watching her with newfound admiration. Gregory, alone in the middle of the restaurant, felt the weight of what had just happened. The humiliation was overwhelming, but at the same time he couldn't deny that Hannah had given him a chance, even if cruelly conditioned. Humiliated, yet with a new spark of hope, he left the restaurant aware that his journey was far from over. The road ahead would be long and painful, but perhaps deep down, he knew this was the only way to find his redemption. The cold dawn in New York was about to give way to the light of morning as Gregory Faulkner approached the headquarters of McAllister Capital Group. He had spent the previous night at the shelter, where he took a shower and donned clean clothes donated by charity. The hot water, for the first time in months, made him feel a bit more human, but the new reality awaiting him left no room for relief. He was about to begin the most humiliating job of his life, under the command of the woman he had destroyed. Upon arriving at the company entrance, Gregory hesitated for a moment, gazing at the imposing building that Hannah had built from the ground up. He had never set foot there before. McAllister Capital Group emerged after his fall, the result of Hannah's hard work and determination. Now he was there, not as an investor or executive, but as the new janitor. The cleaning supervisor led him through the company's hallways, explaining his new responsibilities in a professional but distant tone. Gregory could barely hear, his mind flooded with memories of who he once was, the power he wielded, and the bitter irony of being there now on the outskirts of everything. His first destination was the executive floor restroom. Memories of other luxurious bathrooms where he once admired himself in the mirror came rushing back. The difference was that this time, he wasn't there to adjust his tie or rehearse his speech, but to clean. Kneeling on the floor with the scrub brush in hand, he began scrubbing the floor and sinks, trying to block the growing feeling of shame that consumed him. As he cleaned, he heard the door open and footsteps approaching. He looked up and saw a man he recognized immediately, David Collins, a former colleague who had worked with him at Faulkner Industries, now a director at McAllister Capital. Gregory knew he would recognize him, but he didn't expect the reaction that followed. David, a cynical smile plastered on his face, pulled out his cell phone and started recording.
"Look who we found here,"
he exclaimed, his voice dripping with malice.
"The great Gregory Faulkner, the Emperor of Wall Street, cleaning bathrooms like a simple janitor. This is going to be a hit on social media."
Gregory felt his heart sink as David's words echoed in the restroom. He knew that this moment, this public humiliation, was just the beginning of what was to come. He tried to remain calm, but the shame was overwhelming. The video, as expected, went viral quickly, circulating among employees and soon reaching social media. The man who once dominated the financial market was now a laughingstock and a target of disdain, his fall displayed for all to see. The video of Gregory cleaning bathrooms spread like wildfire. Within hours, it became the main topic not only at McAllister Capital but also on social media, where he was the target of cruel jokes and malicious comments. The image of a former millionaire, now reduced to a janitor, was a delicious irony for many who had been victims of his arrogance in the past. The impact on Gregory was devastating. As he cleaned the restroom, the words he had heard and the laughter echoing in his mind mixed with painful memories. He remembered when, as a powerful man, he had looked down on those who did this kind of work. He recalled how he ignored janitors as if they were invisible, believing they held no importance in the grand scheme of things. Now he was in their place. Anger and shame bubbled within Gregory, a toxic mix that made him feel smaller than ever. He scrubbed the sinks with a silent fury, his thoughts swirling in his mind, fueling an emotional crisis he desperately tried to contain. The idea of giving up crossed his mind several times that day. Why continue? He was alone, without support, without friends. The humiliation seemed endless. As the pressure built inside him, Gregory paused for a moment, letting the scrub brush fall to the floor. He leaned against the wall, breathing heavily, and for the first time allowed the tears to come. It was a silent but deep cry from a man who had fallen from the highest pedestal to the deepest abyss. His mind drifted to all those he had looked down on, including the janitors, the lower-tier employees he treated as nothing. It was then that he heard a sound beside him. One of the other janitors, an older man named Miguel, entered the restroom. He saw Gregory there on the floor, with his face covered in tears. Miguel, a simple man who had worked in that role for years, looked at Gregory with an expression of understanding, but also firmness.
"Hey,"
Miguel said, kneeling beside him.
"we've all been there, man. I know it's tough, but you have to keep going. Remember, you're doing this to start over. Don't give up now."
Gregory looked at Miguel, surprised by the kind tone amidst so much disdain. That small act of kindness was like an anchor that kept him from sinking further. He took a deep breath and nodded. There was something in Miguel's tone that made him realize that perhaps this was the first real step in his long journey toward redemption. At McAllister Capital, Gregory was met with suspicion and even hostility from many of his new colleagues. Most of the cleaning staff hadn't worked with Gregory during his powerful days, but they knew his story from the rumors that circulated through the halls. To them, he was the man who represented everything they disliked about the rich and powerful: arrogance, cruelty, and an absolute disregard for the less fortunate. Some of the janitors, however, had worked for Gregory at Faulkner Industries. These were the most resentful, as they vividly remembered how he treated them like trash, dismissing them without a second thought. Now, seeing Gregory in the same role he once despised was for them a bitter and satisfying irony. As he tried to interact with the other janitors, Gregory faced a wall of disdain. During breaks, he would sit alone, the sound of his attempts to join conversations often ignored or met with sarcasm. At one point, while trying to offer help to a younger colleague struggling to move some cleaning equipment, he was rebuffed with a brusque gesture and cutting words.
I don't need your help. Go take care of your bathrooms, Faulkner.
That rejection was a hard blow. He was genuinely trying to be helpful, but his efforts were met with coldness and contempt. Days turned into a repetition of silent humiliations and small acts of rejection. He was treated like a pariah, not only because of his past, but also because his presence served as an uncomfortable reminder that fate could be cruel to anyone. Gregory felt completely alone. There was no one there to comfort him, no one he could trust. Each interaction reinforced the bitterness of the situation. He had fallen from a height few knew, and the ascent seemed impossible. But something inside him, perhaps that small act of kindness from Miguel, kept him moving, one step at a time. The hours of work were long, and the work itself was exhausting. But at night, when Gregory left the building to return to the shelter, he realized that despite everything, he had managed to survive another day. And that survival, amidst pain and humiliation, was in some way a kind of victory. He didn't know how long it would take to be accepted or even respected. But one thing was certain: Gregory Faulkner was no longer running away from his life. He was facing it, head-on, for the first time. Nights had become Gregory Faulkner's greatest enemy. During the day, he could occupy his mind with cleaning tasks, interactions, no matter how painful, and the constant effort of simply putting one foot in front of the other. But when the darkness of night fell, thoughts and regrets surged to the surface, haunting him in a way he had never experienced before. Nightmares began to invade his dreams, bringing with them fragments of a past Gregory wished to forget. At first, they were just flashes of faces and voices he tried to repress. But as the days passed, those nightmares became clearer, more vivid, until one night he found himself reliving one of the darkest moments of his life. In the nightmare, Gregory was back in his childhood home, an imposing mansion that now appeared dark and empty. He walked through the hallways that seemed to stretch endlessly, until upon reaching the living room, he saw someone he hadn't expected to find there. It was Tommy, his childhood friend who had grown up alongside him. They had shared dreams and secrets, but Gregory's reckless ambition had ultimately ruined Tommy's life in an irreversible way. Tommy was sitting in a chair with a lost look, as if he were trapped in internal torment. Gregory tried to approach, but his feet felt heavy, as if made of lead. It was then that he realized they were not alone. In the doorway, standing silently and observing, was Laura, Tommy's wife. She looked older than Gregory remembered, her face marked by pain and sorrow. The look she cast at Gregory was not one of hatred, but of deep suffering, a pain he knew he was responsible for causing. Laura didn't utter a word, but her eyes spoke volumes. She had been Tommy's rock, always by his side during the toughest moments. Yet even her love and support were not enough to save Tommy from the spiral of despair he had fallen into after being betrayed by Gregory. In the nightmare, Gregory tried to explain. tried to apologize, but the words wouldn't come out. He was mute, helpless, as he watched Tommy slowly rise and walk to the window. The moment that followed was like a film in slow motion. Tommy looked at Laura one last time, tears in his eyes, before throwing himself out of the window, disappearing into the darkness. Laura remained where she was, motionless, as if petrified by shock. She then turned to Gregory, but not with anger, which perhaps he could have endured. What he saw was something worse, a silent pain, a wordless accusation that he, Gregory, had taken away the man she loved. Guilt weighed on him like a stone, and at that moment, Gregory wished he could wake up, but the nightmare held him captive. When he finally awoke, screaming in the middle of the night, Gregory was drenched in sweat, his heart racing. He knew that this was not just a dream, it was a manifestation of the internal demons he had tried to suppress for so long. The memory of Tommy and Laura, the woman who had lost everything because of his blind ambition, was a deep scar he had tried to ignore, but now it bled anew. Gregory sat on the edge of the mattress, breathing heavily as he processed the nightmare. He had ruined Tommy's life, leading him to the despair that resulted in his death and left Laura alone to deal with the consequences. That night, Gregory understood that he needed to confront these truths, no matter how painful they were. He needed to face not only his mistakes, but also the people he had destroyed. The question that lingered in his mind was whether he deserved any kind of redemption, knowing that the lives he had touched were forever marked by his selfishness. But to begin healing, Gregory knew he could not continue to run away. He would need to confront the darkness of his past to find some kind of peace, if that was even possible. And perhaps, starting with Laura, he could somehow attempt to repair the irreparable. The hours dragged on slowly that night after the nightmare, and Gregory could not sleep anymore. The image of Tommy haunted him, mingled with the faces of other victims of his arrogance and greed. He thought of Hannah, of what he had done to her, and how now he was depending on her mercy to survive. The shame and remorse were unbearable, and he began to wonder why he was still trying. Why continue fighting when everything inside him screamed that he deserved to be on the streets? When the sun finally began to rise on the horizon, bringing with it the start of another day of humiliation and struggle, Gregory made a decision. He could not go on. He did not deserve the help he was receiving from Hannah, and certainly did not deserve a second chance. He was no longer the man who could face the world. He was a broken shadow of who he once was, and perhaps, deep down, he knew he could never be anything else. Rising from the mattress, he put on the same clothes he had worn the day before. They were dirty and wrinkled, but he no longer cared. Resolute, Gregory grabbed the small bag that always accompanied him and left the room, determined to disappear. He walked through the streets of Manhattan, avoiding any eye contact, ignoring the first shops opening their doors for a new day. His goal was clear: to return to the streets, where he believed his place was, where he could lose himself and forget. However, when he arrived at the McAllister Capital reception to collect his things before leaving, he was surprised by a letter. The receptionist called him over, handing him an envelope with his name written in hand. He looked at the paper, hesitating, but something made him open it right there. It was a letter from Hannah.
Gregory, I know you're thinking about giving up, but remember what you promised, to yourself and to me. I didn't offer you this opportunity out of pity. I offered it because I believe everyone deserves a chance at redemption, even you. If you run away now, you'll be proving that everything they said about you is true. But if you stay, if you keep fighting, you can prove that they're wrong. I believe you can be better. Not for me, but for yourself.
Gregory felt the weight of Hannah's words hit him like a blow to the chest. He hadn't expected that. He expected more scorn, more humiliation. But there was something in those words, something that made him stop and reconsider his decision. With the letter in hand, Gregory felt the internal conflict tearing him apart. To run away meant succumbing to despair, but to stay meant facing all the demons that pursued him. While Gregory was still grappling with the decision to leave or stay, Hannah appeared at the reception. Their eyes met, and she immediately understood what was happening. Without waiting for an explanation, she approached, taking the letter from his hands.
I knew you would try to run away.
She said, her voice firm but not angry.
I can't take it anymore. Hannah,
Gregory said, his voice choked.
I deserve to be on the streets. I've ruined so many lives, including yours. How can I go on? How can I deserve anything good after everything I've done?
Hannah looked at him for a long moment, her eyes evaluating every inch of the broken man before her.
Gregory, if you think running away will alleviate your guilt, you're mistaken. Running away will only make you continue to be the coward you once were. I've wanted to give up too, you know. When you humiliated me and destroyed my career, I thought about throwing it all away. But do you know why I didn't? Because I realized that the only way to overcome the pain was to face it, fight against it, and emerge stronger on the other side.
She took a step closer, the intensity of her presence almost overwhelming.
You think you don't deserve a second chance, and maybe you don't. But running away isn't the answer. Redemption doesn't come from what others think of you, but from what you do with yourself. Prove that you can be better. Not for me, but for you.
Gregory fell silent, Hannah's words reverberating in his mind. He wanted to keep running, to hide from the shame, but something in her voice, something in the sincerity of her words, made him stop. Maybe, just maybe she was right. Maybe facing his demons was the only way to any kind of redemption. Hannah, sensing that her words were having an effect, did something unexpected.
Come with me,
she said, turning to leave the reception. Confused, Gregory followed her, and they walked in silence through the streets until they reached a small apartment building, simple yet clean.
I rented this place for you. It's modest, but it's yours. If you're truly determined to change, you'll need a place to regroup. Use it wisely.
Gregory looked at the building, then back at Hannah, gratitude and conflict visible on his face.
Why are you doing this for me?
He asked, his voice heavy with emotion. Hannah smiled slightly.
Maybe because I believe everyone deserves a chance to be better, even when the whole world says otherwise. You have this chance, Gregory. Don't waste it.
With that, she left him in front of the building, allowing him to absorb what had just happened. Gregory felt a mix of emotions as he looked at the apartment door. Running away was easy. Facing the past and trying to be a better person would be the real struggle. And in that moment, he made a decision. He would stay and confront his demons, because he finally understood that true strength lay in not giving up, but in pushing through, even when everything seemed lost. The days at McAllister Capital continued to be challenging for Gregory Faulkner. The constant humiliation and distrust from his colleagues turned every hour of work into an internal struggle. But as time passed, something began to change within him. Where there had once been only resentment and shame, now there emerged a quiet curiosity, a desire to understand the world around him in a way he had never done before. Gregory began to observe the other janitors and employees with new eyes, more attentive. Before, he saw them merely as peripheral figures in his power-centric universe, but now they were more than that. They were people with stories, with struggles that went beyond appearances. He noticed how some co-workers arrived exhausted, with deep, dark circles under their eyes, yet still made an effort to do their best work. One day, while sweeping the corridor near the conference room, Gregory noticed a young janitor, Clara, with whom he rarely spoke. She was a small woman with brown hair and sad eyes, who always moved quickly, as if in a constant hurry. Gregory began to pay more attention to her, frequently seeing her look at her phone with concern, as if waiting for bad news. It was during a break, while he was having coffee in the small employee kitchen, that Gregory overheard Clara speaking softly on the phone.
Yes, I know, Mom, but I'm doing my best. They need milk and bread, and I don't have enough.
She fell silent when she realized he was listening, but the words had already been spoken. Gregory pretended not to notice, but something stirred within him, a genuine connection he hadn't felt in a long time. Gregory began to observe more closely. He saw how Clara counted every penny in the cafeteria, always choosing the cheapest meal and sometimes just settling for a piece of fruit or a piece of bread. He saw how she always hurried to leave right after work, likely to pick up her children from school or to work a second job. For the first time, Gregory didn't feel pity, but empathy. He started to understand the weight she carried, and it made him question more about the lives of the other people around him. As the weeks passed, the empathy Gregory began to feel for Clara and the other employees transformed into a genuine desire to help. However, he knew that his past and the disdain they still held for him would make any direct gesture suspicious. He didn't want to seem like he was trying to buy their acceptance, so he decided to act discreetly without anyone knowing. Gregory started to stay after hours to clean areas that were not his responsibility, doing the work of others without them noticing. He organized workstations, kept cleaning supplies tidy, and even cleaned some of the busier restrooms, where others rarely had time for a proper clean. He did this in silence without expecting any recognition. One day, upon seeing Clara leave early, Gregory noticed that she had forgotten her phone on the desk of one of the offices he was cleaning. He picked up the phone and went after her, but stopped when he saw a photo that appeared on the locked screen. Clara with two small children, a boy and a girl, smiling shyly. That image stayed etched in his mind. He knew those children were the reason for all the struggles Clara faced daily. Gregory made an impulsive but sincere decision. That weekend he went to the bank and withdrew a small amount of money, a portion of what he had managed to save. It wasn't much, but he knew it could make a difference for someone like Clara. On Monday, he arrived early for work and left an envelope in her backpack, along with a note that simply said, "For your children." He signed it with a name that wasn't his, so Clara would never know who had left the money. When Clara found the envelope, Gregory was in the nearby corridor, organizing cleaning supplies. He saw the moment she opened the envelope, the expression of surprise and gratitude spreading across her face. She looked around, searching for the responsible party, but no one seemed to know anything. Clara held the envelope close to her chest, and for a brief moment, tears welled in her eyes. Gregory, hidden behind a door, felt an uncontrollable wave of emotion. For the first time in years, he cried, not out of shame or despair, but from a deep connection to the act of helping someone without expecting anything in return. The anonymous gesture Gregory made for Clara marked the beginning of an internal change he couldn't have predicted. He felt more connected to the world around him, more aware of the struggles of others, and in a way, he began to see a new reason to continue, to redeem himself. This new feeling also led him to a growing need to resolve issues from the past, especially with Hannah. One night, after work, while Gregory was putting away his cleaning supplies, Hannah appeared in the corridor. She hadn't seen him for a few days and noticed something different in his posture, a lightness that hadn't been there before.
Gregory.
She called softly, making him stop and turn to her.
Yes?
He replied, trying to hide his surprise at seeing her there.
I wanted to talk to you. Can we go to the conference room?
She asked, with a tone that left no room for refusal. Gregory nodded and followed her, nervous about what she might want to discuss. When they reached the room, Hannah closed the door and sat down, indicating for him to do the same.
I've noticed you've changed.
She began, looking directly into his eyes.
There's a difference in how you act, as if you're lighter. What happened?
Gregory hesitated for a moment, but then felt it was time to be honest.
I started to see the people around me in a different way. I think for the first time, I'm understanding what it really means to care. I've been thinking a lot about what I did in the past, how I treated people, and it haunts me every night.
Hannah listened in silence, but something in her expression suggested she understood what he was saying.
Gregory, you know we all go through moments when we want to give up, right? When you humiliated me and destroyed my career, I thought about giving everything up, but I didn't, because I knew that the only way to get back at you, to move on, was to become stronger. That's what kept me going.
Gregory felt a lump in his throat. He had never imagined Hannah so vulnerable, and it made him respect her even more.
I'm sorry, Hannah. I'm so sorry for everything I did to you and everyone else. I just wanted to be different, to be better.
Hannah smiled, a small but genuine smile.
I know you feel that way, Gregory, and that's why I'm here now, offering not just a second chance, but also my support. You have a long way to go, but you don't have to walk it alone. I'll be here to ensure you have the tools to rebuild your life.
This conversation marked the beginning of a new phase in their relationship. It was no longer a matter of superiority or a debt to be paid, but of mutual respect and understanding. Hannah saw in Gregory something he was just beginning to discover: the capacity to change, to grow, and to find a redemption that went beyond words. And for the first time, Gregory felt not just gratitude, but a true desire to be someone better, not just for others, but for himself. The months that Gregory Faulkner spent working at McAllister Capital brought profound changes, both in his life and in his perception of the world and himself. The journey toward redemption was far from easy, but he was finally beginning to believe it was possible. However, life had one more test for him, a test that would put his newly discovered morality to the test. It all started on a Friday night, as Gregory was finishing his daily tasks. The hallways were nearly empty, with most employees at McAllister Capital heading home, eager to start the weekend. Gregory, however, still had a few tasks to complete. As he walked down the hallway of the lower floor, he heard a noise coming from one of the storage rooms. It was a low sound, like someone rummaging around furtively. Curious and a bit concerned, he approached the slightly ajar door and peeked inside. There he saw Miguel, the janitor who had shown him compassion on his first day, going through the shelves. Miguel had been a kind of guide for Gregory, teaching him the tricks of the job and offering words of support when he needed it most. But what Gregory saw that night was unexpected. Miguel was stuffing cleaning supplies and some boxes of groceries into a large bag. The expression on Miguel's face was one of guilt and desperation, and Gregory immediately understood what was happening. Gregory stepped back, trying to process what he had witnessed. He knew that Miguel had a large family to support, 3 children and a sick wife. His colleagues' financial struggles were no secret, but seeing him steal to survive was a shock. Gregory knew that if he reported the theft, Miguel would lose his job, and possibly everything that remained for his family. However, doing nothing would also mean compromising his own position and the trust that Hannah was beginning to place in him. The moral dilemma was torturous. Gregory spent the rest of the night awake, wrestling with the decision. He knew that what Miguel was doing was wrong, but at the same time, he could not ignore the reason behind the act. He remembered the times he had made immoral choices out of greed, never considering the consequences for others. Now, faced with Miguel's situation, Gregory found himself at a crossroads, one that would test his new perspective on life. The next morning, Gregory made a decision. He knew he needed to confront Miguel, but in a way that could help, not destroy. He found Miguel at the end of the shift as he was putting away his cleaning supplies.
Miguel, we need to talk.
Gregory said, with a tone that mixed seriousness and concern. Miguel, sensing that something was wrong, looked at him with a cautious expression.
What happened, Gregory?
Gregory took a deep breath before speaking.
I saw what you did last night. I saw you taking things from the supply room.
Miguel's face drained of color. He knew what that meant.
Gregory, please let me explain. I didn't want to, but I'm desperate. My wife is sick, my kids need food, and the money I make here isn't enough. I know it's wrong, but I had no other choice.
Gregory could see the desperation in Miguel's eyes. He knew he could not condemn him for doing what he needed to do to support his family.
I understand, Miguel.
Gregory said calmly.
But you know that if someone finds out, you could lose your job, and that will only make things worse. I can't let that happen.
Miguel lowered his head, knowing that Gregory was right.
I know, but what can I do? I'm at my wit's end.
Gregory paused, considering his words carefully.
I will help you, I will give you the money you need out of my own pocket so you don't have to steal anymore. It's not much, but it will help until you can find something better.
Miguel looked at Gregory, surprised and ashamed.
I can't accept that. I've already caused too many problems.
You can, yes,
Gregory insisted.
but you need to promise me that you will stop this, that you will find another way to support your family. And in return, I will take responsibility for what you've already taken.
Miguel was silent for a moment, struggling with the shame and gratitude he felt.
I promise, Gregory. I will never do this again. And thank you, truly.
Gregory nodded, and in that moment, he knew he was doing the right thing. Instead of exposing Miguel, he chose to protect a man who was in a desperate situation, even if it meant taking responsibility for something that was not his fault. Gregory prepared for any consequences that might arise, knowing that for the first time he was truly acting out of altruism, not self-interest. The next day, Gregory was called into Hannah's office, a summons he had dreaded since the moment he decided to help Miguel. He entered the room, trying to stay calm, but his heart was pounding in his chest. Hannah was sitting behind her desk with a serious expression that Gregory couldn't decipher.
Gregory, have a seat.
She said, her voice firm. He complied, bracing for the worst.
I heard about what happened last night.
She began, and Gregory felt a chill run down his spine. Had someone seen? Did she know the truth?
I know that you decided not to report Miguel.
Hannah continued, observing every reaction on his face.
And I also know that you took responsibility for what happened, even knowing that you could face the consequences. Why did you do that?
Gregory took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the situation.
Because it was the right thing to do.
He replied without hesitating.
Miguel was desperate. He didn't steal out of greed, but to feed his family. I know what it's like to make bad decisions for the wrong reasons, and I didn't want him to lose everything because of that. So, I took responsibility because it was the only way to protect him.
Hannah was silent for a moment, evaluating his words. Then, something changed in her expression.
Gregory, since the day you started working here, I've been watching you, waiting to see if you truly had changed. This was the final test, and you proved that you are a different man.
Gregory was taken aback.
You knew all along?
Hannah nodded.
I wanted to see how far you would go to protect someone who had nothing left to lose, and you passed the test. You made an altruistic choice, a choice that shows me that the man you used to be has finally given way to someone better.
Gregory felt a wave of emotion wash over him. He never expected to hear those words, especially from Hannah.
I don't know what to say. I just wanted to do the right thing for the first time in a long time.
Hannah smiled, a genuine smile that he rarely saw.
And you did, Gregory. You did what was right, even when it was hard. That's what matters.
Gregory felt his eyes welling with tears, but this time, not from sadness or despair, but from gratitude. He had changed. Finally, after everything, he had become someone he could be proud of, someone worthy of a second chance.
Thank you, Hannah.
He said, his voice choked.
Thank you for believing in me when I didn't even believe in myself.
Hannah nodded again. She was watching Gregory with an expression of understanding, as if she knew he was still carrying a weight that needed to be released.
Hannah,
Gregory continued hesitantly.
I asked for your forgiveness before, but I know I never fully understood what you went through because of me. I wanted to know, what was it like for you after I fired you?
Hannah took a deep breath, as if gathering the courage to revisit a painful past.
After you fired me, Gregory, my life turned into a nightmare. I lost my career, my income, and for a time, my dignity. I was completely alone, and the doors that had once been open to me closed. I slept in my car for weeks, not knowing how I was going to move forward.
Gregory felt a tightness in his chest as he heard this. He knew his actions had been cruel, but he had no idea of the devastating impact they had.
I never wanted to destroy you like this,
he said, his voice full of regret.
I was blinded by power, by the need to control everything around me.
Hannah nodded, her eyes shining with a mix of pain and determination.
I almost gave up, Gregory. But deep down, something told me I needed to rise up, not for revenge, but for myself. I managed to get temporary jobs, saved every penny, and slowly, I was able to rebuild my life. It was the hardest experience I've ever gone through, but it made me stronger. And ironically, it helped me create McAllister Capital, the company I now lead.
Hannah's words were a testament to her strength and resilience, but they also served as a mirror for Gregory. He saw in her what he could have been if he had made different choices in the past.
Hannah,
He said with tears in his eyes.
I am so sorry, not just for you, but for everyone I've hurt. I never wanted to destroy you like this, and now all I can do is try to be a better person, like you have become.
Hannah looked at him with a gentle expression.
Gregory, what matters is what you do from here on out. I forgive you, not just for you, but for me as well. We need to leave the past behind and move forward in a better way.
Hannah's words of forgiveness were a relief for Gregory, but he knew there was more to be done. The ghost of Tommy, his childhood friend, still haunted him, and Gregory knew he needed to face that part of his past before he could truly move on. With Hannah's support, he located Laura, Tommy's wife, who now lived in a small house on the outskirts of town. On the day he decided to visit her, Gregory felt the weight of his actions like never before. He approached the door of the simple house, his heart pounding in his chest. When Laura opened the door, her eyes widened at the sight of him, but there was no surprise, only a deep sadness that seemed to never have dissipated.
Laura,
Gregory began, his voice trembling.
I came here to ask for your forgiveness. I know my words won't fix anything, but I needed to look at you and take responsibility for what I did. I destroyed Tommy's life, and because of that, I destroyed yours too.
Laura looked at him for a long moment, the silence heavy between them.
You did destroy Gregory.
She finally replied, her voice soft but firm.
Tommy trusted you, and what you did, he never managed to get over it. I lost the man I loved, and there's nothing that can bring him back.
Laura's words were like knives to Gregory's heart, but he knew he needed to hear it.
I know, Laura, and I'm willing to do anything to try to make up for it, even though I know it will never be enough. I want to help in any way I can.
Laura sighed, her gaze tired.
Gregory, what you did was unforgivable, but the hatred I carried for you didn't bring me peace. What I want now is for you to use your life to do good. Do for others what you couldn't do for Tommy.
Gregory nodded, tears streaming down his face.
I promise, Laura. I will do that. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be a better person, trying to help others avoid the same traps I fell into.
Laura said nothing more, but her gaze softened, as if somehow the forgiveness Gregory had been seeking was beginning to form. He said goodbye to her with a lighter weight on his shoulders, knowing that there was still much to be done, but that the first step had been taken. After the meeting with Laura, Gregory returned to McAllister Capital, feeling a newfound energy, a renewed determination. He had faced one of the biggest mistakes of his life and, in some way, emerged from the other side a little lighter. When he met with Hannah again, he knew he had to share this experience. He needed to talk about what he had discovered about himself.
Hannah,
Gregory said as he entered her office.
I went to see Laura. I asked for her forgiveness, and she showed me that there's still much to be done. I realized that no matter how far I fell, it's in vulnerability that I found true strength. I've never been so weak, but I've also never been so strong.
Hannah, sitting in her chair, watched him with a mix of pride and respect.
Gregory, what you did is something many never manage to do. Facing the past, admitting your mistakes, and above all, changing, that is true strength.
Gregory nodded, feeling her words penetrate deep into his soul.
I used to think strength was never showing weakness, but now I know that true strength comes from confronting your demons, accepting your flaws, and using those experiences to do good.
Hannah smiled softly.
And that's why you are a different man today, Gregory. You are no longer running from who you were. You are using your story to create something new, something better.
In that moment, Gregory felt that he was finally on the right path. There was no longer any need to hide from the past, to try to redeem himself through easy means. Redemption, he now knew, lay in accepting his flaws, in doing good, and in continuing to change one step at a time. As he left Hannah's office, he felt an inner peace he had never experienced before. He knew there was still a long way to go, but for the first time he was ready to face it, not with the desire to conquer the world, but with the sincere will to become a better person. And this, for Gregory Faulkner, was the greatest triumph of all. On a cold Saturday morning, Gregory Faulkner prepared for a solitary and emotional journey. He knew he had to do this alone. He dressed in simple clothes, suitable for what he considered a farewell to his old life. As he stepped out of the small apartment that Hannah had rented for him, Gregory looked at the city that had once been his playground. Now, those streets no longer represented power or control, but rather the backdrop of a redemption story he was writing. Gregory's first stop was his old mansion, a vast property located in one of the most prestigious areas of New York. When he arrived, he parked the rental car across the street, preferring to observe the house from a distance. The mansion that once represented everything he had achieved now belonged to another family. He could see children playing in the yard and hear laughter echoing in the space where, for so long, only silence and the coldness of power reigned. Gregory felt a pang in his heart, but not of regret. He knew that house was no longer his, nor should it be. After a few minutes of contemplation, Gregory stood up and walked to the sidewalk in front of the mansion. He had no intention of getting any closer. Instead, he took out an envelope containing old documents, the last material vestiges of his past life. There were business records, contracts, and even the original deed of the mansion. He had kept these papers as a reminder of who he once was, but now he understood that to move forward, he needed to leave it all behind. Gregory lit a lighter, and without hesitation, burned the documents one by one, letting the ashes scatter in the wind. With this gesture, he bid farewell to the man he once was, leaving behind the vanity, arrogance, and remorse that had consumed him. His next stop was the building where, for many years, Faulkner Industries had dominated the financial scene. Upon arrival, Gregory barely recognized the place. What had once been a symbol of power and success was now a much smaller office, with an unknown name on the facade. He entered the lobby and went up to the floor where his empire had existed. When the elevator doors opened, he was greeted by a space that no longer had the shine or prestige of before. The walls that once displayed works of art and diplomas were now bare, and the air was filled with the scent of something old, almost forgotten. Gregory walked through what remained of the office, touching the walls and surfaces that, for so long, represented the center of his universe. Now, all of it seemed insignificant. He opened a window and let the cold wind invade the space, taking with it what remained of the memories of that place. There, in that moment, he made a promise to himself. He would never again be consumed by what once destroyed him. With that, he closed the office door for the last time, determined to move forward with a clean heart. After saying goodbye to the past, Gregory and Hannah met again at the same restaurant where their lives had crossed so dramatically. Sitting at the same table, the atmosphere felt different now, laden with new possibilities and a renewed calm. The restaurant was quiet, the soft murmur of conversations in the background creating a warm ambiance. Hannah watched Gregory with a look of satisfaction, like someone who had witnessed a great transformation.
Funny that we're here again,
she remarked, glancing around.
This place marked a turning point for both of us.
Gregory nodded, reflecting on how much had changed since that fateful meeting.
Yes, it was here that everything started to change for me, and despite all the pain, I am grateful for it.
Hannah smiled, sensing the sincerity in his words.
And you have much to be proud of, Gregory. The way you embraced this change, how you committed to becoming a better person. It made me think about how we can leverage this new perspective at McAllister Capital.
Gregory lifted his gaze, curious.
What do you mean?
Hannah leaned in a little closer, choosing her words carefully.
I want you to take on a larger role in the company, not just as part of the team, but as someone who can help shape our future. You have a unique vision, Gregory, something that goes beyond simple management. I think it's time for you to lead something bigger, something that reflects this transformation we've experienced.
Gregory fell silent for a moment, processing what Hannah had just suggested. He understood the message. This was a promotion, an opportunity to apply everything he had learned in a way that could truly make a difference.
I accept,
he said with a calm smile, feeling more confident than ever.
I want to contribute meaningfully, not just to the success of the company, but to the well-being of the people who are part of it.
Hannah smiled, pleased with his decision. They toasted, not only to a new phase in their lives, but to a renewed partnership and the future they were ready to build together. There, in that restaurant that once witnessed Gregory's downfall, they now celebrated the beginning of a new chapter, marked by leadership with purpose and compassion. With the past finally left behind, Gregory was ready to start anew, but this time with a completely different perspective. He and Hannah were preparing for an important meeting at McAllister Capital, but there was something different this time. Gregory was no longer there as a mere janitor or someone who needed to prove himself. He was there as a mentor, someone with a powerful story to tell and important lessons to share. When he entered the conference room alongside Hannah, he noticed all eyes were on him. But they were not looks of disdain or judgment. They were looks of respect and curiosity. Hannah opened the meeting, introducing Gregory in a way he never imagined.
This is Gregory Faulkner,
she said.
A man many of you know for his past, but today he is here because of who he has become. Gregory has a life story that all of you can learn a lot from, and he is here to help those who are going through difficulties, whether in their careers or personal lives.
Gregory, taking a deep breath, began to share his journey, from the days of glory and downfall to his struggle for redemption and what he had learned about himself and the world around him. He spoke about the mistakes he made, the people he hurt, and how he found the strength to change by confronting his failures. The room fell silent as he spoke, and at the end, when he concluded, there was a pause before everyone stood up to applaud. The applause was long and warm, but what touched Gregory the most was the sincere recognition in the faces of the people around him. He did not smile out of pride or vanity, but because he finally felt at peace with himself and with the world. When the applause ceased, Hannah stepped forward.
I am appointing Gregory to a position of responsibility at McAllister Capital, not because he was someone important in the past, but because he is someone I trust to help lead our future.
Gregory thanked her with a nod, feeling a deep gratitude for this new chance. He knew that his work was just beginning, but this time he was not alone, and he was determined to make a difference in a way that truly mattered. And so, Gregory Faulkner, the man who had fallen so low, began his new chapter, not as the Titan of old, but as someone who finally understood the true meaning of strength and redemption. Years had passed since Gregory Faulkner concluded his journey of redemption in New York. Far from the skyscrapers and the bustling life of the city, Gregory found peace in a small village in upstate New York. The big city life was behind him, and he now lived in a simple house surrounded by green fields and rolling hills. The home, modest yet cozy, was the opposite of the mansions he had once inhabited, a conscious choice to reflect the man he had become. Every day, Gregory walked through the small town, greeting the residents with a sincere smile. He had become a beloved figure in the community, known for his kindness and willingness to help. But his true passion lay in a charity project he had established, a support center for homeless individuals, similar to the shelter that once provided him refuge. The center offered not only food and shelter, but also rehabilitation programs, job training, and emotional counseling. Gregory spent hours talking with the residents, sharing his own story of downfall and rise, showing them that no matter how low their situation, there was always a chance for redemption. On a sunny afternoon, Gregory was sitting on a bench outside the center, watching the young people who frequented the place. One of them, a skinny boy with eyes marked by disillusionment, approached hesitantly. Gregory recognized that expression. It was the look of someone who had lost everything, just as he had once lost.
Hi, can I sit?
The young man asked.
Of course.
Gregory replied, moving to make space.
How are you feeling today?
The boy hesitated, then shrugged.
It's hard. I don't know if I can get out of this. It seems like the more I try, the deeper I sink.
Gregory nodded, understanding.
I know how it is. I've been where you are now. I lost everything. My fortune, my home, my friends, my dignity. And at the bottom of the pit, I thought there was no way out. But little by little, I found my way back.
The young man looked at him, surprised.
But you seem so at peace now.
Gregory smiled, a smile filled with wisdom and experience.
That's because I learned that peace doesn't come from external circumstances, but from how you deal with what's inside you. It's not easy and it's not quick. But if you keep going, if you believe you can change, then you'll find your way too.
Gregory placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, a gesture of support.
You're not alone. We're all here to help you. And when you're ready, I'll be here to listen and guide you, just as others did for me.
The young man nodded, and in that moment, Gregory saw a spark of hope emerge in his eyes. It was a moment that brought deep satisfaction to Gregory, a reminder of how much his life had changed, and of the positive impact he could now have on the lives of others. While Gregory found peace in the countryside, Hannah McAllister continued to thrive in New York City. She became a respected and admired leader, not only for her business acumen, but also for her compassion and sense of justice. Gregory's journey deeply inspired her, and she incorporated those values into every facet of her company. McAllister Capital grew, not just in terms of profit, but also in social impact. Hannah launched a series of initiatives within the company aimed at supporting employees facing personal and professional difficulties. She created financial support programs, psychological counseling, and growth opportunities for those who, like Gregory once did, needed a second chance. These initiatives did not go unnoticed. The company received awards for corporate social responsibility and was highlighted as a model of how business could be conducted with humanity and empathy. But for Hannah, the most important aspect was the environment she had created within McAllister Capital, a place where everyone felt valued, supported, and part of something greater. During an annual company meeting, Hannah spoke to her employees, reflecting on the journey the company had taken.
A few years ago, I learned that true success is not just in the numbers, but in the people who walk alongside us. Everyone here has a story, a struggle, and it is our responsibility to support one another. McAllister Capital is not just a company, it is a community, a family.
She paused, observing the faces of her team, many of whom had benefited from her initiatives.
And it all started with a lesson I learned from someone who completely transformed. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this, it's that it's never too late to change, to do good, and to find a new purpose.
Hannah's words were met with enthusiastic applause, but she knew that the true legacy was not in her speech, but in the lives being transformed every day within the company. Gregory's journey had been a catalyst, but the impact both of them were making would continue for many years, spreading like ripples in a tranquil lake. In the tranquility of his home in the countryside, Gregory Faulkner reflected on the long road he had traveled. Sitting on the porch as night fell, he watched the stars begin to twinkle in the clear sky. Each star seemed to represent a moment in his life. Some shone brightly, others were more distant, almost dimmed, but all were part of the larger picture. Gregory thought about how his life could have ended tragically if he hadn't found the strength to change. He could have continued on the path of self-destruction, consumed by guilt and regret. But the unexpected kindness of people like Hannah and the support he received in his darkest moments had saved his life.
It's funny.
He murmured to himself.
How the things we value most at first, the material achievements, end up being the least important in the end.
He reflected on his former obsessions, power, money, status, and how all of that seemed so empty now compared to the peace he had found in helping others and being true to himself. Gregory thought of the people who had crossed his path, both those he had harmed and those who had helped him rise again.
In the end,
He continued in his monologue,
it's not about what you've achieved materially that matters, but how much you've been able to change, redeem yourself, and do good for others.
He knew that this was the greatest lesson he could leave behind, the importance of becoming a better person, not for recognition or validation, but because it was the right thing to do. He smiled, a calm and sincere smile, as he looked out at the horizon. He felt that, despite everything, he had finally found the true meaning of life. And with that, Gregory Faulkner, the man who had fallen so low, finally felt complete, at peace with himself and the world around him. Gregory Faulkner's journey shows us that no matter how far someone falls, true redemption only happens when we face our mistakes head-on and work to rebuild ourselves with sincerity. Life is full of second chances, but it's up to us to decide what we'll do with them. If you were in Gregory's shoes, would you have the courage to change even when facing so many hardships? Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave a like, and comment your thoughts on the story. Also, check out the next video by clicking on the card that's appearing on the screen. Thank you so much for watching.